Hey everyone, and welcome to the Movie Making Podcast with your host, Kieran Harvey. In this installment, we'll be looking at a few specific filming techniques used in camera work and cinematography. Those being rule of thirds, depth of field, and single point perspective. Rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is not so much a rule, but a piece of guidance when composing any type of shot. The shot is divided into 9 equal squares or straight lines, 2 vertical and 2 horizontal. Anything seen on screen should be in line with these guidelines and spaced equally. For instance, if you see someone's face, their eye line should be on the top line and centered. If a character is talking in a direction to someone off screen, they will be in line with one of the vertical lines. If there are 2 characters, there will be one in each line and have their heads meet on the corners where lines cross. Most of the time things won't be exactly on the lines, but around the area where they are. To demonstrate, here is something we filmed ourselves. As to how this has been applied in movies, well, this is something you can see everywhere. The vast majority of movies you see use this type of composition. Here are some examples. The Incredibles. Here the character on the right is tall and looking down on the other. His face and eyes are perfectly on the cross of lines. The shorter one has their eye line right above the lower horizontal line. Harry Potter. The single character here is perfectly centered in shot. His eyes are just above the top line. His head is exactly in the middle of the vertical lines, making his whole body in the middle. It is spaced in a way that is smart and yet simple. 7. Here a character is sat down and talking to someone off screen. He is positioned to one of the vertical lines with his face near the horizontal line. The space to the side of him is left empty on purpose, so when watching you get the feeling that he is talking in a direction to someone. Depth of field. When cameras take in everything in a shot, they can adjust the focus of objects. This is when you see something close up, for example, that is in focus, but the background is blurred, or vice versa. Depth of field refers to the range between the closest thing on screen that is in focus and the farthest thing in focus. A large depth of field, where most or everything is in focus, is called deep focused, and a small depth of field, where only certain things are focused, is called shallow focus. Balancing depth of field relies on 3 key elements: aperture, focal length, and focus distance. Aperture is the size of the camera lens's opening, or f-stop. A small opening will create the deepest and largest depth of field, typically used for outdoor shots. A larger opening will create a shallower and smaller depth of field, typically used for indoor shots. Focal length is the magnification and zoom of the lens. Zooming in reduces depth of field, and zooming out increases it. Focus distance is the distance between the subject filmed and the camera filming. When a subject is close up to the camera, the focus range is very shallow. A subject further away gives a much larger focus range. To demonstrate this, here is another example of our own. Now, here are some examples of that in action in film. The Social Network. This close-up shot has a selective low depth of field. The Dark Knight Rises. This wider shot uses a larger depth of field. Single point perspective. Single or one-point perspective is when all shapes and objects seen get smaller as they get further away, from the outside edge into the center of the image, with a single vanishing point on the horizon. Essentially, everything on screen is getting further away and closing in on a spot in the middle of the screen. A grid overlay like this is used to show this with shots. Here is another demonstration of our own to communicate this. The biggest example of this in film is from the director Stanley Kubrick. Although he is not the only filmmaker who has used this technique, he is the one who used it the most, in fact in almost everything he did. Full Metal Jacket, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and The Shining are examples. So, to sum up today's podcast, these three techniques are simple, subtle ways in which most modern-day movies are made, but they go a long way to help the movie seem lifelike and connectable. Using these in any filming you do will look professional and educated, and help you stand out to your peers. That concludes today's lesson. Thank you for listening, and as always, feel free to send us requests via our website. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.